Andretti Global entry into Formula One. The Andretti name is something famous over decades in F1, but it had a long absence in F1 even though it is a race-winning brand in many other racing categories. But now they are trying to make their way into F1 as the second American team in the current F1 grid. They have already submitted the necessary paperwork to FIA and had a meeting with FIA President Mohammed Ben Sulayem in Miami in parallel to the Grand Prix. Michael Andretti, the owner of Andretti Racing, believes that FIA is in support of his effort of joining the Formula One Championship after this meeting. He discusses his efforts and sounds out the governing body on its formal process, which requires the FIA to issue a call for interest for new entrants during that meeting. He is very confident about getting an opportunity to enter Formula One, as he is already moving forward with Andretti Global's initial plans. As an American team, they will be based on the Indianapolis, and now they are in a plan to start the construction of their F1 facility next August. This is a 100% risky investment, as they are still in the initial discussion stage with FIA. Commenting about his F1 project, Andretti said, "We're spending money to get the ball rolling because we feel like we're hopefully going to get it. We're taking a risk, but we think it's worth the risk, because we've got to get the ball rolling, so we're hiring people and things like that." The former IndyCar champion, Andretti, states that funding is not an issue for his Formula One plans. But Andretti will not make this as a single investment by himself, and there are rumors regarding his backers for Andretti Global. It is believed that Guggenheim Group, which owns Los Angeles Dodgers, is also involved in this investment too. It is still not a smooth road for Andretti Global to make its way into the Formula One Championship. Michael Andretti was interested in buying a currently active F1 team, as it was easier than establishing facilities for a new team from the beginning. His attempt to overtake the ownership of the Sauber Group, currently known as Alfa Romeo, but the deal came to an end at the final process of overtaking. Then, his intention was totally on establishing a new Formula One team. He has many hurdles to jump prior to getting his pass to the F1 Championship. Mercedes principal Toto Wolff was the first one to question the strength of Michael Andretti to establish a Formula One team. But it is interesting to see whether his reasoning is fair enough to close the entry of the 11th team into the Formula One Championship. With the first news of submitting a paper by Michael Andretti to enter into Formula One Championship, Toto Wolff questioned the strength of the Andretti Racing to enter the F1 world last February. Toto said, "Andretti is a significant name, for sure, and the American market is important. Every team that is joining needs to add value. It's not only by paying a $200 million entry fee, but it needs to demonstrate, in my opinion, what it can do for all the other teams and for Formula One and the FIA. Only then the sport will grow. But if a real brand with good people, necessary funding, not only the $200 million, but probably you need more, around $1 billion if you want to play in this club straight from the get-go, then why not?" he continued. Entry of the teams like HRT and Marussia into the championship and their withdrawal from the Formula One Championship after a few seasons due to financial issues make the FIA think twice about giving an opportunity to a new team. When considering new entries, Haas is the only team to remain in the championship for a sustained period of time. HRT was a Spanish team, and Marussia Racing was a Russian-backed investment. Haas is also from the USA, where Andretti Racing is based. That is one piece of evidence that USA has enough economic strength to support a F1 team from their country. Formula One is not the most popular single-seat racing in the country, and the IndyCar series occupies that place. But American interest in Formula One is now growing rapidly with the success of the Austin Grand Prix, and now Miami is joining the F1 calendar by this year too. The joining of Las Vegas as the third USA-based race on the F1 calendar by the year 2023 is a good proof of the demand for Formula One within the USA. Haas joined Formula One in the year 2016, and it remains in the midfield since then. It wasn't competitive enough to be a top team. Anyway, Andretti is a successful team in the US-based IndyCar series, and its experience in single-seat racing will be an added advantage to remain as a top team in F1. In addition to Haas, New York-based Doralton Capital is the owner of the Williams F1 team too. This is clear evidence that US-based investors are interested in Formula One, and with joining of the third USA-based Grand Prix to the Formula One calendar, it will be an attractive investment opportunity for the American investors. We can see many American brands are on different F1 liveries as major sponsors. If Andretti is successful in creating a competitive F1 team, there are enough financial supporters from the USA to back his Formula One team. The latest comments from Toto Wolff regarding the Andretti F1 entry is just after Michael Andretti's meeting with the FIA president in Miami. This time, he questions the effect on the prize fund after the expansion of the grid with the 11th team. If we have a true American team with an American driver, that would be very beneficial, said Mercedes boss Toto Wolff. But we have 10 entries today. We divide the prize fund among those 10 entries. We have invested considerable amounts over the last 10 years. Each of the organizations sitting here on the podium has probably put more than $1 billion into their Formula One projects over the years. So it needs to be additive. If a team comes in, how can you demonstrate that you're bringing in more money than it's actually costing? Because an 11th team means a 10% dilution for everybody else. So, if one is able to demonstrate that, then we should all be sitting at the table and cheering for such an entry. But that hasn't been demonstrated yet. And that may sound a bit dry because it comes down to the numbers, but the value of Formula One is that it's a limited amount of franchises, and we don't want to dilute that value by just adding teams, he continued. Even though fans see that Toto Wolff blocking the entry of the Andretti Global from the very beginning, it is somewhat fair to not having 100% faith on Andretti Racing, as this is a business which outside its value as a sport. As we saw in recent history, several F1 teams just come and go. That's why F1 and the FIA appear reticent to add a team in the short term, and the existing teams are worried they will lose money as they all take a share of F1's commercial revenue. McLaren principal Ross Brown, who has spoken to Andretti about his bid, was in full agreement with Toto Wolff as well, because every team is going to lose a considerable amount of money if an entry of the 11th team happens. We've 10 great teams, and an 11th, 12th team need to add value to the sport, said Brown. Obviously, the Andretti name has a huge history in various forms of motorsport and would add a lot of value. So, as long as it's a team that helps build the sport, unlike some of the entries we've seen come and gone in year 2 or 3, then we can't accept teams like that. But a very credible racing team with a credible brand, with the right resources, will be additive to the sport, and that appears to be what Michael has put together. So on that basis, we are supportive, Brown continued. The entry of Andretti Global into F1 will be easier and quicker for Michael Andretti if the acquisition of the Sauber team was successful. But the establishment of an entirely new Formula One is a completely challenging one, as mentioned above. If he is successful in jumping over all of those hurdles, then it will be effective in many ways. As a well-established racing team in other categories, Andretti will bring that same competitiveness into F1 grid as well. Economically, an American-based team will be capable of bringing billions of money from the USA as revenue, and this money will be capable of creating more competitiveness in F1. Fans are really interested in this entry, and let's keep hopes for a much longer grid in 2024 with Andretti's name in there.